Iran, it had bombed Yemen, it had bombed Lebanon. It bombed our ship in Malta, which was 2,000 kilometers away. And there's absolutely no accountability. Everybody just sitting and doing nothing. But that is where you have a total breakdown of international law, because if you're not bringing anybody to account, then everybody's going to start doing whatever they want. And that will collapse the whole system.
18 minutes after 5 p.m. Drive this Tech Tuesday edition, 91.3 FM. My name is Muhammad Junaid Shafika, in conversation with Ismail Mullah, South African representative of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. Now, Ismail, you mentioned something extremely important. Iran up against the Zionist regime without its proxies, primarily led by Washington and the United States, the so-called bulldog that goes in and, blows a lot of smoke and makes a noise, etc., etc. But looking at comments coming from Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, amongst others, they've estimated already, as a result of the Iranian hypersonic missiles that have managed to successfully and persistently pierce through the Iron Dome, which we know now it's a fallacy, it's not invincible. They've estimated the damages in Israel already to be in excess of $500 billion. So Operation True Promise. Now Iran, I think in the 21st or 22nd, self-defense and retaliatory strikes on the Zionist regime, proving that they are effective, they are circumspect and extremely clinical, very strategic. They've targeted specific sites. And I think the Zionist regime probably ran off to Washington calling for a ceasefire ahead of time because they can no longer handle it. Yeah. Mm.
He's now getting the short end of the stick because, again, he is left alone. But let us not underestimate that the Americans themselves are fully behind what the Israelis does.
Yes.
So you could have a situation for now. I mean, there are reports that are coming that Trump is very upset with Netanyahu, but he's been upset with Netanyahu before. That doesn't
Yes, yeah.
So the reality is that we must be proud that the Iranians have the courage to do what they did.
Mm.
And they are also on standby because they are realizing that the Zionist regime is known for breaking ceasefire.
Mm.
Can't let their guard down.
Now, with the current scenario, Iran strategically targeting, Ismail, the U.S. military base in Qatar, also strategically targeting the U.S. military base in Iraq last night, making the United States see, ahead of the shock and awe failure over the past weekend, the Fordow nuclear facility, the sensitive materials were already removed from the site in advance. There is an indication that Russian intelligence may have collaborated with Iran in advance to forewarn them as to what was to come. So essentially, that shock and awe failure of Operation Midnight Hammer was a disaster. And expecting perhaps that the Iranians would roll over a couple of days after the acts of terror and aggression committed by the Zionists in the early hours of June 13th. That didn't happen at all. But Iran possibly showing the vulnerability of the United States, Ismail, in the Middle East with all these military bases in the Gulf states, many classifying the Gulf states as the second Iron Dome, sadly, of the Zionist regime.
You know, these American bases are not there only to protect Israel, but they are there to protect those countries where they are based. So even Qatar, I think, it's so sad that Qatar gave them a $450 million plane, but can't give a liter of water to our brothers and sisters in Gaza without Zionist permission. So the reality is that these are all stooges of the Western governments. And we were having a discussion at the meeting last night where we talked about being Palestine. But what we also need to do is we need to see all the neighboring countries.
Yes, indeed.
They are also not free
They're not.
until and unless they can dictate their own foreign policy.
Mm.
Only then can we start looking at the possibility and the reality of Palestine.
Mm. Very true.
We need to broaden the freedom movement.
Yeah,
Freedom in all these Arab states.
absolutely. Ismail, in conclusion, as we wrap in the next 2 minutes, Iran has threatened to close the strategic straits of Hormuz. We understand the Iranian parliament already approved it, but it must obviously be taken to the Shura Council and the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, etc., for a final decision to be made. If that happens, we know the disaster that could erupt, the knock-on effects globally. But here I'm thinking primarily of Europe, who is also being complicit, many of the countries in Europe, complicit in the genocide that the Zionists have been executing against Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. But Europe relies exclusively on the crude oil to come out of the Straits of Hormuz. This will be a disaster for the Europeans. Mm.
And I think everybody is aware that these processes, if they happen to roll out, it's just going to make the situation worse, and there's going to be full blown out consequences. And I don't think so that any country wants to go through that process. So I think there's a lot of rhetoric at the moment. But if they have to close that strait, remember, the Americans will then take it upon themselves to make sure that it is open.
Mm.
And that would have serious repercussions again for the region. But I am thinking that for now, there will be the process that we are going forward to is one of de-escalation. War is a very bad thing.
Yes,
It's bad for everybody.
indeed.
So, if we have a situation where there just can be de-escalation and, people's lives are being saved and communities are being saved and buildings are being saved, why not?
Very true. Very true. So the Zionist regime continues to appear very apparently as not so-called, but indeed a paper tiger without the support of Washington and all its other proxies. This laughable so-called ceasefire, absolutely ridiculous. Member of the South African representative of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, Ismail Mullah. Jazakallah, thanks so much for joining us on PM Drive and Voice of the Cape.
Craving something truly special? Get ready because Luku has arrived. Imagine golden crispy sweet puffs, soft and fluffy inside, topped with rich chocolate, caramel, nuts and sprinkles. Every bite is pure indulgence, paired with a freshly brewed coffee or a thick, decadent milkshake. Come visit us at the corner of Klipfontein and Carney Road. See our sweet puffs crafted fresh right before your eyes. Die wat die geproe het nie, moet proe. Maak 'n draai by Luku.
Winter specials now on at Elite Cash and Carry. Go